There's something strangely fascinating about dead games, those forgotten titles that once had thriving communities but have since faded into obscurity. Whether it's nostalgia, curiosity, or the thrill of exploring abandoned digital worlds, we are often drawn back to these relics of the past. Some revisit dead games to relive old memories, while others discover them for the first time, intrigued by their unique mechanics, atmosphere, or the eerie emptiness left behind. In a gaming industry obsessed with the next big thing, there's an undeniable charm in revisiting what was lost, uncovering hidden gems and keeping the spirit of these forgotten experiences alive. Rust Legacy is a dead game that is my absolute favorite to play. For those who don't know, Rust Legacy is the early access version of the popular survival game Rust. This game feels completely unfamiliar to the modern state of the game, and this is actually where I spent the majority of my hours on the game. My friends in middle school introduced me to Rust during its early access period in 2014, and I remember pouring in countless hours gathering resources, looting, hitting airdrops, and protecting our base from raiders to try and hold on to as much guns as we could. Once the major update came for Rust, Facepunch still gave players the chance to revert to the early access version of the game, until 2018 when they decided that they would no longer offer it. Luckily though, we have a project that has been single-handedly holding up the Rust Legacy community on its back, called rustlegacy.eu. You may be wondering at this point, why would anyone prefer the early access version of the game to the current state? And that answer is complicated, as it's not just for one reason. So let's take a look at why I prefer Rust Legacy over modern Rust. Rust Legacy had a gritty, raw feeling compared to modern Rust that felt more polished and more complete. The game had an almost eerie aesthetic, with its rough textures and barren landscapes contributing to a feeling of isolation and vulnerability. Unlike the polished look of today's Rust, Legacy felt unrefined, which only added to the atmosphere. The world was quiet with minimal background noise and only the distant sounds of gunfire, wild animals, or the occasional footsteps of an approaching enemy breaking the silence. This sense of desolation made every encounter more intense. Rust Legacy's map was handcrafted rather than procedurally generated, so every new server had a sense of familiarity. There were also popular looting spots like Hangar, Small Rad Town, Big Rad Town, Factory Rad Town, etc. that are instantly recognizable and memorable spots to Legacy players. Also, just a side note, Small Rad is the absolute GOAT looting spot, and you cannot tell me anything differently. Nostalgia plays a huge role in why Rust Legacy is still remembered fondly, as it introduced many players to survival gaming with its raw, unpredictable gameplay. The janky mechanics, community-driven servers, and even the exploits became part of its charm, creating memories modern Rust can't replicate. It was a time when the game felt more like a chaotic sandbox rather than a competitive grind, making encounters more spontaneous and the world more mysterious. Players keep returning to dead games like Rust Legacy, hoping to recapture the feeling of a game that no longer exists in its original form. Lastly, Legacy had a more accessible progression system. There were much fewer blueprints and resource gathering was less tedious, which meant players could get into the action faster without the extensive grinding required in modern Rust. Yes, the resource gathering grind was still pretty brutal and vanilla loot was straight cheeks, but luckily there are modded servers available that make the grind a little bit easier. Still though, Legacy is a much more accessible and simple experience than its modern counterpart. These are the reasons why I, and others like me, still love playing Rust Legacy, even though the community is pretty small. At the time of recording this in 2025, the amount of online players would bounce between 40 to 60 whenever I'd be online. By all accounts, the game is completely dead, but out of all the dead games out there, Rust Legacy is my favorite. So let's jump in and explore a few of the remaining servers on Rust Legacy. The first server I joined into was a lightly modded one called EU Rust Reborn. It doesn't have any crazy modifiers added onto the resource gathering or looting, but more so added some extra console commands like set home and had instantaneous crafting times. One of the more arduous tasks in vanilla Rust Legacy is waiting for items to craft, as some had up to a 5-minute crafting timer per item, which is insane to have to wait 5 whole minutes for one item just to finish crafting. Shortly after joining the server, I decided to go looting, which is my first go-to when starting up a new server. And I must have had some insanely incredible luck because today, not even 15 minutes onto starting, I came across a shotgun in one of the crates, and shortly after came across a bolt-action rifle. For those who haven't played Legacy before, a bolt-action rifle is one of the most rare guns to find in the game. Finding any guns in Legacy is already finding a needle in a haystack, but finding two so close together was literally a miracle. Sadly though, I wouldn't find any signs of life on this server. I would ultimately come across a sleeping person near a small rad, and I would quickly dispose of them to get my grubby little mitts on that succulent, juicy loot. Outside of that though, the only thing to do on a legacy server with no other players is to kill some radioactive bears and wolves to get more loot. I took care of the ones outside of small rad, but they didn't have anything too inspiring. I didn't happen to come across any easily raidable houses, and due to no airdrops coming on in the few hours I spent on the server, I never found any C4 or explosives that would inspire me to go looking for a raid. I did come across an incomplete house that I 100% usurped and where I would ultimately lay my head to rest. I am confident though that before tomorrow, someone will have broken in and taken all my goods, and honestly, I hope that's the case. I want someone to pick up where I left off and put those weapons to good use. Enjoying the map and getting to loot in some of my old stomping grounds did bring back a lot of great memories and really honestly some joy. But now that we've taken a look at an empty PvE server, let's take a look at one that has a little bit more life to it. The next server we are going to be playing is called Wild Island X5. It's a heavier modified server with kits that you can obtain, has increased resource collection, and modified loot chances to reduce the amount of grinding needing to get into the action. I didn't play for too long on this server, but I did come across one player who only wanted to kill me named Bedwars. Bedwars, if you're watching this, you destroyed me in hand-to-hand combat and I yield to thee. I ended up checking out small rad to see if I could come across any guns, built a small starting base, and hopped off to check out the last server for the video. The hard thing about Rust Legacy is even though it's much simpler than modern Rust, finding C4 or grenades to raid people is nearly impossible without airdrops, which rarely ever happen. Even when they do spawn in, you can count on everyone else being there with guns camping it out to suckle that juicy loot straight from your paws. So sadly, I didn't partake in any offline or online raids for this video, but I did get my cheeks absolutely handed to me in a little player versus player combat. The last server I checked out is an arena server, and the purpose of this is to provide a purely PvP experience in a small sectioned off area of the Legacy map to practice gunfighting from various angles. I am going to give a content warning now. The following footage you're about to watch is embarrassing, and the gunplay in this game is super hard. I have not played Legacy in years, so do not come after me in the comments for all of my missed shots. The first day I played, there was a few others that were online, and I spent about 20 minutes soaking in all of the fun. You spawn in with every gun and attachment in the game, so you can try using out each different weapon. I used to think that I was nasty with the bolt-action rifle, but that quickly has faded. I was missing damn near every shot and probably had like a 0.2 KD. I ended up hopping off but came back onto the server the following day, and there was one person on this time. He had some fun killing me over and over again while I was failing to hit any of my shots. I think I only got one kill in the short period of time I played this day, and it is proof that I do not belong in any clan or team on this game. Rust Legacy is a very dead game, but it still holds a special place in the hearts of those who played it. Whether it's the nostalgic atmosphere, the simpler gameplay, or just the memories of chaotic encounters, there's something about it that modern Rust can't quite replicate. For me, it's my personal favorite dead game, though the PvE elements aren't very fleshed out. Even with its tiny player base, the fact that there are still people keeping it alive says a lot about its lasting impact. So whether you're a longtime fan or just curious about this forgotten version of Rust, there's still a ton of fun to be had if you're willing to step back in time and give it a shot. But I'd love to know your thoughts on Rust Legacy versus modern Rust, whether you prefer the newer version or whether you'd like to explore the raw, unfiltered experience of Legacy. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts, as well as any other video topics you'd like me to explore. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to help support the channel, and drop a like if you enjoyed our deep dive into Rust Legacy. I appreciate you all very much, and I hope that you have an incredible rest of your day. Peace!